Alright, Hello Internet, for the win here. I am slightly ill, but I've taken the time today to look at a map called, I believe it's PL Greenwood A2. I'm afraid I don't remember who the map maker is. I'm a little bit too lazy to tap to check right now. This should be a quick and dirty video. I haven't refined or polished this at all. I've really just spent like maybe 32 minutes to an hour looking through the map. I want to dump some impressions on there, and I know it's a little bit rude to do that, not really giving a thorough review. I haven't even probably checked all the spawn times and stuff. The main thing is that there's a lot of what I perceive as problems with this map that don't really require a thorough, in-depth analysis. That's not me trying to be mean, it's just that there are some big takeaways that I think take priority over the lot more of a noodly stuff. That said, I'm probably going to still go into a lot of noodly stuff. Unfortunately, it's just part of my personality. Alright, so I'm here in the prison of Blue Spawn, where we have two shutters that open up into a kind of intermediate of lobby area. They are resubbable, but I think this sort of misunderstands the purpose of the back room. The purpose of to have a secondary spawn room is really to break a lot of the sightlines, and sightlines like this that exists kind of make me think this was just done for the sake of being done. It's also weird because it's actually on the opposite side. Generally you put the spawn away from the direction the cart goes, but here you can see it's actually on the inner circle. So you can cut an inner circle across and immediately come out on this high ground, which makes me think this is probably the majority of where blue should be taking space, because the other side is primarily just dominated by snipers. It's also very weird to have a resupply cabinet in the box, but also a resupply cabinet out. I don't know, I thought that was quite interesting, because this entire area is just kind of like loitering airspace. Room space. So there is a lot of exits to the blue spawn. One, two, that's kind of like on the far side. Or, well, I shouldn't say a lot, but they're very spread out and very different in many ways. This low ground exit is very interesting to me because it doesn't have a clear side. There's a Halloween map I can't remember the name of right now, but it has the cart come out, and this pocket existing here is something that has to be cleared before the cart can be pushed. What makes it a little bit even more annoying is technically you could reinforce it constantly from this drop-down window. I'll talk about that in a little bit. But generally what you want to do to make attackers feel comfortable pushing through a space is to have one side already cleared for them. You can see I don't know if there's any enemies in there, but if you have like a fence across, especially because the space feels so open, you can kind of eliminate that possibility. I also think this is just typically more pub feeding player style. You want to very clearly depict an area that kind of is the line of do not cross, if you go to line theory, right? And this gets a little bit more muddled because it seems like you're encouraging people to kind of bait next to their spawn and die, which can be awkward and can definitely result in rolls in your playtest because you have people essentially trying to hold the spawn and then getting wiped. Outside of that, to talk more about gameplay specifics, this is probably the primary thing about the map. The phrase I use to describe TF2 is that it's a mobility shooter, right? And the thing that's beautiful about TF2 to me is when you play a lot of TF2, you can start to express personality in terms of your movement and read that in other people's movement, which is, I don't think there's another game like that. And these trees are just simply put, they're a nuisance. They're just an annoying object in all of this gameplay combat space. Like, this is combat space, but the cart threads through these trees and these rocks in a way where these props are something that's very awkward to fight around and even see through, right? Probably the best example is I'm a sniper sniping here, right? I can still shoot through the tree, and I can snipe people all the way over here or even on this hill. Right, they have to try to spot me through the trees. So TF2 is this game with good silhouette management, so that you can see an enemy from a good distance away, recognize what class it is, and you immediately violate that by putting a smack prop in the middle of the combat space that I have to shoot through and around. It's just very awkward placement of this. I don't know why you decide to put this in combat space. If it's aesthetics, like, throw it out of there. It doesn't need to be here, or like shave the tree, or have the tree line go above a certain point. Another like very minor nitpick is you can stand on all of these trees. So you might think, oh, it's kind of funny, it doesn't really matter, but it is kind of annoying, especially dying to something like that, especially out of spawn. Swiftwater has trees like this in combat space close to its third, fourth, whatever point. And they actually go as far to put a trigger on the top of each one of the trees so that you can't do that. Now, what's funny is they removed a tree, but they didn't remove the trigger. So if you go show triggers, you can go find that yourself. But that's neither here nor there. Talking more about the map. I think for the most part, the way this point where you play is your attacking team is just going to spill onto this platform because there's nothing really preventing them from doing that, and then they should be able to take the choke. And that's my initial thought. Then I realized you have a red hold spot here that nothing can contest, and it's immediately outside of spawn. So to talk immediately about the spawn, okay, you have a 45-degree angle spawn. I leave the spawn facing directly this way. Which way am I going to think to go? Instinctively, forward. Yeah, my instinct would be to jump out this window, but that's very awkward because I smack into a wall and then I'm like, oh, well, I guess I must go around or under the other way. Or to go down this way, which is obviously backwards, right? So this is just like player intuition thing. I know it's an A2, you probably haven't worked on this too much in terms of like routing, but why would you have your spawn face backwards. It's not going to encourage people to go to the right? So you might put a big arrow or something there, but I think many map makers will tell you that people generally just ignore arrows. Pig had a giant one with like flashing lights, and someone ignored it and looked for something in the background. Just face your spawn the correct way. You just have it angled that way. People will walk that way. I promise you. They'll be like, okay, I walk forward. I hold W. People hold W outside of spawns. It's like the #1 thing, which makes me think a primary red hold outside of spawn will take place on this hill, and this will absolutely shut down anyone coming through these two routes. So what does that mean? The majority of a blue attack is going to take shape through these tiny, awkward corridors, spilling out onto the side where there's the least red pressure, which is going to be trying to get out this way. And because you still have a choke here, it means you're trying to spill most of your attackers all the way around into the sort of flanking motion. Let's talk about this room first. So, to get to this room, you have to go left, and then you have to drop into a pit, and then you have to go right. And then this is just, it violates a lot of stuff about TF2 combat, where, again, people aren't going to want to drop on low ground. They're not going to want to go up winding corridors. And then if I'm fighting someone in this room, just imagine there's a soldier up there, and I'm taking this fight as any class. Look how miserable this feels. It's just incredibly awkward. I don't really know. Like, there's a time and place for these 180 staircases, but I think you should try to minimize this and keep the direction of combat where I expect enemies to come from to be kind of uniform. Like, in front. Like, this is my side, that's their side. Like I said, especially when you're attacking and close to the spawn, people getting flanked by awkward routes is going to feel incredibly awkward. This kind of like drop down out here is actually incredibly hard to tell. It's only going to be used by attackers first off, right? Because defenders first off, because attackers would actually have to jump up there, so you only have like hypermobile guys being able to use it. And from here, honestly, the first time I didn't even realize it was a place you could be. I was counting the exit routes and counting the spots I could be assaulted from, and I was like, okay, well, there's a window. That's kind of annoying, but I did not realize that there's just this little peek out cubby here that'll be pretty annoying. Besides that, you definitely overuse window combat. Remember when I said TF2 is a mobility shooter? Well, imagine you take all the mobility and creative of a class and you force people to walk through windows with this awkward bar that can block them, and all their mobility just basically shunted into shoving themselves through a very tiny square. It's the same thing with a lot of doorways. A lot of indoor areas don't let you express that personality and mobility. They just are spam fests. So that's not to say that you don't use them, but you should use them sparingly. Where I don't really like when you have back-to-back, door-to-door-to-door-to-door. I especially think one of the things that's dangerous, I'll talk about this later on, is free vision. This kind of like chicken wire fence or anything like that. It can result in some very degenerate gameplay. We're talking like a dome man watching a trap, or a sniper basically watching a corner, and you're not allowed to peek that corner because he can see you start moving there. Right? So you have to be very careful with this and think why you're actually putting that there rather than just doing it for detail effect. Not that you did that, but like in stuff like this, if you want vision here, I would just make it solid. It's super annoying to want to cross this, but to be vulnerable to a sniper from Kingdom Come. Yeah? So yeah, it's just very awkward in terms of where you want to play here as a player. There's, as far as I can tell, no real routes for me to rotate what I wouldn't be vulnerable to along sniper sideline, which I'm especially sensitive to when it comes to sniper sidelines. So yeah, just all the windows being open feels just really weird to me. I'm not sure if you're trying to enable fast rotations or what. Dead end streams like this, I'm just not generally a fan of them. I'm guessing you designed something like this because you want to be able to break the point over a long time, right? But I feel like you could do that more naturally and not in a way that comes out being so awkward, because this route basically deletes itself after a certain point. So it ends up just being kind of like extraneous space in a way that I'm not really a huge fan of. Besides that, the biggest thing I would note is you kind of have really inconsistent airspace where, like, I can't get on that roof, but I can get on this roof. Hello? Why? And then the spawn roof is blocked off, but it's shorter than that one. And then this roof you can get on, but again, I think this entire area should be sealed off. And look at all this space here where it just seems like dead space to me. Like, why is there this much expanse of the corner? It just makes it more annoying to check and everything else. Then there's other stuff. Let's say I'm rotating here as an attacking player, and there is a demo man who starts wearing stickies, and I'm like, okay, I can't push this way. You've now forced someone, if they want to make the intelligent decision not to feed into that demo man and rotate out, they have to do this jump, to this jump, to this jump. It's just incredibly awkward, and the question is, why is this rotation route awkward, right? So who is going to use this rotation route? Attackers. Did you make this rotation route awkward because you want it to be harder to attack? If so, why? because it's not a significant rotation route, and that it like cuts a huge corner and forces the defenders to rotate in a significant way. It's just awkward in my mind for the sake of being awkward, where it could be smooth and would probably make gameplay feel better, but it ends up being this like 3 or 4 prop jumps, or once again, for those players who really care about the mobility of this game, you're kind of like, you're making them not want to play. Like, you're kind of shunning them away from the map, is what I'd say. The same thing for these jumps. This jump, there's a reasonable argument for it, because it gives instant access onto a medium high ground, but in that case, you don't want them to be able to do it in combat, and you shouldn't have something like this, where anyone trying to do that is going to get wrecked. So, I don't know, there's a lot of mixed messages in this. I think maybe this comes down to experience. I don't know your experience level. I haven't looked into that at all. But your experience level is definitely going to gauge, help you gauge how you want the map to play. And this is one of the things I tell people that I try to do reviews for. Well, I didn't even start with my spiel, right? These is all my opinions, my opinion-based opinions. In the end, the map is your own creation, and what you want to try to achieve is your vision for gameplay. And I think that's the most important thing I tell people when they're looking at demos of their map being played. Don't listen to the feedback where someone says, oh, this is too powerful for attack, this is too powerful for defense. Look at the gameplay and think to yourself, is this how I want people to be playing? And then if like, the attackers fail to push a point, right? Think to yourself, is there something they should have been doing? Is it because they didn't have a teleport? Is it because none of them actually pushed the flank, which is supposed to be the key to breaking the point? And again, that's probably easier to do with experience, but you can also substitute experience, like your own personal experience, with someone who is more experienced. Like any experienced player should be able to substitute their understanding of how a point should play. And that's also what you should pursue, rather than what the playtests show, because playtests are wildly inconsistent. Space like this is the same thing, it's just that space results in very awkward hiding corners. Same thing here, where just the eye level being violated by all these trees is incredibly irritating to me. I can't express how jarring that is. Moving on to the next point. So, there's more of this same thing where I'm talking about trying to get in and out through the windows. I just think it's incredibly awkward. I would try to, it just doesn't really appeal to me in terms of like, there's no way to express your movement jumping through windows. In terms of actually holding this point, it looks like it'd actually be pretty brutal. Like, you can tap to the point, but if the team isn't like... So in a pub server, it might not be a problem, right? But if I look at this space you've given, there's one route in, which is this low ground, right? Low ground to the point. And then there's a second route, which is this sort of tunnel. The tunnel itself has a decently long rotation, because if I'm attacking, right, I have to go up there, I have to go around. Do you see this movement I'm making, right? So I just made a full Z. Like, I'm gonna... Look at the direction I'm holding, right? So right, I'm going to turn 90 degree left, 90 degree left, 90 degree right, 90 degree, more than 90 degree right, and then back left, right? That is not fluid at all. That's incredibly awkward. And then just to talk a little bit about the rollout aspect, I think a key to getting better flow in your map, because people throw that word around all the time, right? If you want good flow in your map, probably the best people to ask are really good soldier players, in terms of soldiers who actually know how to roll out, because a lot of times the time a soldier expresses their mobility the most is when they're rolling out. So if you can't find a way for a soldier to like roll out comfortably or quickly, or it's like no different from other classes, your rollout is probably like a little sloppy, not as clean as you'd like it. And that a lot of that comes down to indoor and outdoor spaces. So obviously this is an indoor space. I can't really get much expressing my mobility, at least not without taking fall damage, which is another thing. I mentioned before, like the 45 degree shoots you this way, so that you just jump out this window and take fall damage. It's just so awkward. I have to wonder how many people on their first time in a playtest do that. Same thing here. You kind of have airspace like awkwardly inconsistent. I can stand on this roof, but not this roof. They're like the same height. And then in terms of, I mentioned pushing this before, there's a really awkward low ground in this tunnel, and what makes the tunnel particularly frightening for me is since you give all this backspace, I could be a sniper basically solo holding this from this far back. And yeah, oh, you know, spy could go super behind and deal with him. But the point is, if you're not a spy and you're not behind the enemy team, you have no way to reasonably rotate or deal with that sniper, because this is a dead end, it doesn't go anywhere. Right? So that's one of the things where it won't probably come up in pub play, because most of the time the point will get capped and rolled. But anytime someone competent actually decides to like set up a hold, I could pre-place teleporters there, and that's no difference. Don't think spawns will save you there against a player who has actually started learning your map. This entire right building is a little bit confusing to me, because it looks like that point, once it falls, this starting front area should be taken. So why is there a long rotating flank unless it's to push the next area? But if it's to push the next area, you've already given an internal route, if I can find it here, because this door opens, I assume, and it goes up into that top area, which just drops down over this entire area, right? And obviously, you could say, okay, well, the door's being watched, but this long rotation route around feels like it could be streamlined into something shorter if you want them to immediately take the point afterwards. Otherwise, it just kind of is, it's pointless. The long rotation is pointless. And this is probably the worst offender in terms of, like, I'm trying to fight someone, and there's a ridiculous amount of trees in my way, especially because the cart turns into the trees here, so it's going to get particularly bad in terms of visibility and foliage. So yeah, I don't know, it's just something to be aware of. Moving on to other aspects of the map, I have almost the same opinion of this, like, bunker house area. It's a long rotation into the flank, long way around, on the outer circle here. And the question is probably why. Because if I'm sitting here, I assume this is kind of like a pseudo-defender hold somewhere around here. You see the cross, and anyone who goes into the house now has to deal with this full health pack if a player is in here contesting them. I guess the summary I'm trying to make here is your flank seems like a claustrophobic holdable space where I think it would be better if it was open and easier to pressure but freer to get into. Does that make sense? Maybe it doesn't, but the thing I'm probably concerned about is this point looks like it was made with this in mind, but this is basically a one choke, right? So if they hold here, then the one choke happens. So instead, there's this random free drop down which was given, so that in the hope that it would break the hold. It's basically like it's power creep. Having an overpowered option to deal with an overpowered hold. And I don't know, in my mind, that doesn't really create good back and forth. I'd like to see defenders being forced to rotate between options like they're plugging holes in a defense, rather than, I think, what you can do, which is just like a static hold, which is a little bit boring. Besides that, rotating here as an attacker until last is obviously very awkward. I think I probably don't have to say that, but you can see, like, this entire thing is awkward. Rotating up like that if I did want to get up onto this high ground. And this entire thing is pretty much exactly what I was saying before. While maybe when you're starting out a map and no one has any idea what they're doing, you can get away with a lot of transparency because people don't even know where the next corner is. They don't know which way it goes. When you have this much transparency, when you have an attacker, let's say I'm a heavy starting to walk up on the cart, right? And then as I start to walk up here, the demo man, really far back here, sees me, so he starts layering stickies at the door. That can feel incredibly helpless. And it's not like you need a god-level player to do that. It's just they see you, so they're gonna pre-do stuff that you can't do anything about. Also, I think I just collided with that. So, yeah, I don't really know. Collision stuff, yeah, whatever, yada, yada, yada. So, in summary, I would probably try focusing on making your maps flow better. That generally means, like, cleaning out the deep, dark corners. And trying, in my opinion, removing a lot of these window combat areas. Like, you really overuse this idea. And then I would focus on cleaning out the combat space in terms of these props. Again, the trees are really, really violating to me. And then try to come up with a nomenclature consistency for your roofs. A lot of people like to use different color roofs. A lot of people use, like, little girder rails. I don't really know what to call them besides that. And then, I don't know. Then maybe I can try to take a deeper look at the map. But for now, I think there's a lot of issues that would overshadow my ability to really accurately assess it. So those are my primary thoughts. Hope they help. Hope I didn't sound too mean. Once again, the main idea is to kind of inspire you into changing your map. If anything I said made sense, you can go ahead and do it. Don't just do it because I told you to. That's not a good way to do anything. As a map maker, you're looking not only to develop your map, but also develop your experience. In the end, what's going to determine the quality of your map is your ability to understand how it plays, why it plays, the cause, reaction, and effect. And hopefully, I don't know, hopefully this helped. Whoop.